Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Generations podcast. Friends, we have talked all about the Acolyte. We have gone on discussions of books. We have watched While the Child Mocks Me on camera, which you can see if you check out our stream or on YouTube. But today we are back to the movies and we're talking about The Force Awakens, a movie that I think now is seen often as part of the sequels, which is obviously a very divisive conversation. And we're going to talk a little bit about it in terms of its larger context in the sequels. But today, I really want to talk about this movie on its own. And I'm doing that with Erin McGowan and Alex Corman, the Star Wars Generations crew, back together again. Erin, let's start with you. And I think for all of us, I want to start with, where were you in terms of Star Wars when you first saw this movie?
Yeah, so I feel like, when did this movie come out? Like 2015?
2015.
Mm-hmm.
2015, so I would have been 13. I was like at that age where I'd kind of like grown out of like the childhood phase of like, yeah, nerdy stuff, and kind of got into the teenage phase where it's like, is that not cool? However, I was homeschooled, so nothing I did was cool. So when I saw this trailer, I was hype. Like, I forgot all about anyone who said it wasn't cool. Like, me and my dad were so excited, and we went to see it in theaters, and it was like, just watching it again and paying attention this time around, I'm like, I could really see myself back in those like theater chairs, like getting fucking goosebumps, jumping so high when Kylo Ren let that blaster bolt go. Holy shit, I almost hit the ceiling. That was so scary. But yeah, so I was in a phase where I wasn't super on to Star Wars, but the moment I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, we are so back.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Where were you at, Alex?
Yeah. So this movie is really special to me, I think, from a psychological standpoint, because, I grew up deep in the fandom from when I was real young. And this movie came out when I would have been, I guess, 18. I was in my freshman year of college. And, I'd always thought when I was younger, I was getting the 6 movies and the Clone Wars, and that's all I was ever going to have. And I was okay with that. Like, I loved it still. But when this got announced, I physically couldn't believe it. And then I actually remember that it was announced and the trailer came out exactly a week after my dad died in 2014. And so it was like the one thing that like was bringing joy to my life at that point in my life. And like, I think I watched the trailer probably 100 times. I just kept rewatching it because it was like this excitement was overcoming me. And, my dad was the one that introduced me to Star Wars. And so it was like this super special thing. And so the movie comes out and I go with one of my really good friends from childhood. And we go to the theater. I go full Jedi robes. There's other people in cosplay. And that was my first time seeing a Star Wars movie in theaters at all, because I wasn't allowed to see Revenge of the Sith in theaters. And so, like, I was just beside myself. I remember leaving that theater and I'm not even joking, I have a video of myself. I was like hyperventilating. I feel like I couldn't walk. I was just so content or anything besides the point. I was so excited that I had just seen a Star Wars premiere, and it was like so special, so exhilarating. So I was like deep in the fandom and deep in the nerdom, but that experience is like one that's just imprinted on my brain for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that's beautiful.
And that is so awesome to hear, because this movie has a very special place in my heart. And that's going to be a part of, I think, what we talk about today, but for a very different reason than you guys. And I'm going to try and say this very much to say this is how I felt at the time. Not that this is an objective statement of the value, just this is how we felt. As you all know, I'm significantly older. I grew up with the original movies. Return of the Jedi was the first movie I saw in theaters when I was maybe 5 years old in 1983. And as people who then came of age with Star Wars, and, in high school and college, we were also talking to our friends, we were nerding out, we were playing the early video games, we were playing the role-playing game. We were so excited for new movies that were going to go into more depth, that were going to go into more nuance, that were going to be more adult. And we're really going to get into kind of the depth of, I think in a lot of ways, like some of the stuff that shows like the Acolyte and Andor and stuff like that have been giving us. Whether this was completely unjustified, like the expectations we put on this movie, you may well say that. I have no idea. We were 20 years old. We didn't know much. There wasn't really the internet at this time. We were just going on hype and vibes. And I think it's hard to describe how crushing the disappointment was when I walked out of The Phantom Menace. Like, it just felt like something I've been waiting for 16 years was entirely wrong. And again, the whole point of this podcast is like not to rag on it. I'm just explaining that mindset at the time.
Mhm.
You all have helped me really understand those movies in a new way, et cetera, et cetera. But like, Erin, I almost called you Ashley, funny enough. Erin, you, because of, Ashley and Ahsoka and all that,
Mhm.
you talked about like Star Wars not being cool. I think that was a big thing that happened, is that beyond even just some people not liking Star Wars, it was kind of like the rest of the people who'd been kind of holding it in for a little bit and been like, okay, you guys are going to get your movies again. Maybe we have to put up you nerds for a while. Like, it's the exact opposite of everything that happened with the MCU. Like, I think the worst point to be a nerd was the years immediately after the prequels came out, because they were perceived to be so bad and such a stab in the back, a mockery of everything Star Wars is supposed to be about. Again, this is just public perception at the time.
Yeah.
And so I, like a lot of people, kind of gave up on Star Wars. And I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed the movies. I still enjoyed talking about them. But there's always this bitter taste in my mouth of, oh, yeah, but then they got ruined.
Mm-hmm.
And then The Force Awakens came out. And I think for many people, myself included, again, I wasn't someone who dived deep into the EU because I was like, I'm just kind of over and done with Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But for many people, what then happened was The Force Awakens felt, yes, it is very similar to A New Hope, and I think there's ways in which we can critique it for that. But to me, and I think to many of my generation, it felt like an apology. It felt like an apology, I think, again, assumes that everyone agrees the original movies were bad, which I don't think is true anymore. But that's how it felt to me like, okay, these people get Star Wars. This feels like what Star Wars is supposed to be. And this kind of next question we're going to say is like, what, how'd you feel about it? You guys sort of talked about this. We'll talk about it more. But for myself, I think, and Alex, it's funny, my mother had died around the same time your father had.
Mm-hmm.
I had kind of spiraled into a bad depression because my marriage had broken up and I lost my career all around the same time. A lot of bad things had happened. And I'm sure that in a lot of ways, I probably projected a lot of the other stuff that was going on in my life onto this movie. But I think kind of similar to what you said, I wound up seeing it 3 times in the first day and then convincing my friend Paul to go see it with me again. Because it was just like, oh, some part of like all the promises that I thought that, I'd been given when I was a kid, none of it worked out. This at least is true. Star Wars is back. And I don't think this podcast would exist if that movie hadn't been so much of a, don't worry, we're going back to Star Wars. And I think for me, let me just, there's more I'll say about the Rey of it all and things like that, which I absolutely loved, but I'll just kind of end it there and I'll kind of let you guys jump in.
I mean, yeah, I fully agree. And like, I think for me, we're just kind of talking generally too, like this movie and like it felt, which some people think is bad, but it felt very similar to episode 4 in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
And to me, I thought this at the time, I still think it now, it was kind of a way to earn the trust back. Because again, I love the prequels, but I recognize, especially at the time of this movie coming out, the prequels were largely seen with a negative viewpoint. And I think this was them being like, we're going to bring back all the original actors. We're going to give you it was kind of a safer movie to make.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a reason that it became at the time the either highest, I think it was second highest grossing film of all time. I think that Titanic still had to beat out, but I mean, I think it was special for a lot of people, and it was the safe way to get back into it. But it was, I think, a beautiful way to get us to reignite, this Star Wars, craziness. And also, I will note that I think I saw it total in theaters. I think this one I saw 8 times. 8 times in theaters. Like I was the same way, Matthew. I was just like, I'm gonna keep going, even if I have to go alone. I would take the bus from my campus in college by myself to go watch this movie because I was like, I'm just gonna keep watching it. So
yeah, that's fair.
As you should. I think I saw it twice in theaters. Again, I was pretty young. I couldn't transport myself or have funds to pay for a movie. So I think I saw it like twice. I think I talked my parents into that twice. But yeah, it was an amazing film. Like you said, Alex, it's very much A New Hope Part 2, but it was awesome. Like, in my opinion, there is nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
It also, if I may just add one more thing, I know, Matthew, have specific stuff, but it also, to me, the movie felt like it was, and still to this day, it was very much designed. It still holds up, but it was designed for that first watch. It was designed for when the first time you saw it, there would be these crazy jokes and surprising. Like, the whole movie is, it's designed for that first. And like, I would tell you, the first time I watched it, they nailed it. I mean, I was losing my mind every second of the movie.
Yep.
But as the more times you watch it, I still think it holds up and it still ages really well. But you can kind of pick out the points where you're like, okay, yeah, I remember when that happened the first time, and I like lost my mind. Like, so it was just funny the way they designed it, very much to be like, let's earn everyone's trust back, let's get them excited that first time, and reel everyone back in.
Yeah, like, go ahead, Erin.
I was just gonna say, I agree. It was so funny, this movie, because it's been a couple years since I've watched it. Oh my God, it's so funny. And like rewatching it, thinking of how many things I used to quote when I was a teenager that I didn't even realize were from this movie. Like, I would always go, "That's mine."
Oh, I do that all the time. All the time.
My friends will
That's
call each
not
other
how
Big
the
Deal
Force
for a little
works.
while. You're a big deal in Resistance.
You're a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's kind of why this movie gets put in a kind of a weird place today, because I think now, especially when people really hate the sequels, I think this movie gets shit on a lot. And I think that there's something to be said for the fact that I think this movie is a lot more style than it is substance.
Yes.
Like, the more I watch it, the more I come to realize that a lot of it doesn't make any sense. Like, if the Republic is the government, and then the First Order is this like thing that's kind of trying to fight the Republic, why is it just the Republic fighting the First Order? I mean, there's a lot of thoughts I have on that, but like the way they talk about the Resistance as being illegal, it's like, well, no, you're illegal. Like, and there's just a lot of this stuff that doesn't make sense, and a lot of plot holes and stuff like that. But I think that this movie had to do a very specific thing, and I kind of feel like this movie gave birth to Disney Star Wars, and some people just have hated that all along, but a lot of us love it and think it's created a lot of really good things. And it is not the movie I most want to rewatch a lot of the time, but I think it's given a lot of great things. And I also want to recognize, and I think this is a thing that a lot of other people have disliked about it, which I think is pretty awful. There's an extent to which, let me give a comparison. I thought that the Wonder Woman movie did a very good job for what it was trying to do, which was saying, let's take a generic paint-by-numbers superhero movie, but make the superhero main character a woman, because that hasn't been done, and basically make that movie. And in a lot of ways, that's also what it felt like it did with this really radical thing of having Rey be the Jedi and having Finn be the black character who was a main character, not the Lando Calrissian sidekick. And I'll kind of turn it to you. Aaron. What did it mean for you to have Rey be that important part of this movie?
I feel like that's a big question. Honestly, again, hormones. I was a teenager, right? And so I feel like I was very much a tomboy at the time. Like, it was me and my best friend. She was the girly girl, and I was like the tomboy. So like people were like, "Oh my gosh, it's a girl Jedi." I was like, "Fuck you guys!" Like, I hated that. But I loved Rey as a character outside of like how people were like pushing it. Maybe I don't know, because people are like, "This is the first time you've seen it." This is it. I just remembered why I would get pissed off, because I'm like, no, fuck you. Ahsoka's a girl Jedi, and she's better than Rey. So I don't want to hear it. Like, that was my opinion. I can see
Erin doing this. I can actively see 13-year-old Erin fighting a person over Ahsoka.
Yeah, like, I will throw hands. It is like, Rey does not top Ahsoka. She's had one movie. She just connected to the Force and used a lightsaber a little bit. Rewatching it, I'm like, damn, she is kind of powerful. But in my mind, I really had played it down.
I got thoughts on. I have many thoughts on that, but
yeah.
I do think that, like, you know, having, especially like with the history of the original movies and a lot of the prequels, cast was predominantly white, and for the vast majority, it was white men. So having a two lead actors who was a woman and then a black man was a huge step forward for Star Wars in general. But unfortunately, fueled a lot of hate because of that early on. And we can talk all about, and I will talk about how they did my boy Finn dirty in the sequels, but that's probably a conversation for another time.
That's for a different movie.
We're
just talking about the beginning.
Today, in this movie, Finn was pretty badass overall.
Freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
All the characters made sense to me. Finn and Poe were fantastic. I still think they should have kissed. In this
I have them written down, bro. I was such a big Finn and Poe shipper. I was so mad they didn't fully send that.
Disney are cowards. They're getting better, but Disney were cowards. Especially because the actors have acknowledged, that's how they played the characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's blatantly obvious in the whole movie. I'm sorry, I felt very passionately about that.
Well, I think especially part of what I liked about them is that they did represent new kinds of characters. There is an extent to which Rey is very much the Luke Skywalker of this story. But then which one of them is Han? The star pilot of the original movies is Luke. But here, actually, it's a non-force using guy who's just a really good pilot, but also kind of a hotshot and sometimes a bit of an egotistical idiot.
Matthew, do you think... I always thought it was an unspoken... I thought Poe was force sensitive. I'll say it.
What?
I don't think he's a Jedi force sensitive, but you watch that movie, he is shooting stormtroopers 2 feet away from Han and Finn on the ground with an X-wing at pinpoint accuracy. I counted. He shoots down 12 TIE fighters in under 1 minute.
I think that movie becomes a million times worse if Poe is force sensitive.
I don't think like Jedi force sensitive, but I think he's a little force sensitive. I don't know. I always, early on, especially when I watched this movie back in 2015, I was convinced that Poe and Rey were related somehow, or that Poe is I just, to this day, I still think that Poe has some level, not enough to be a Jedi, nothing crazy, but just low level of force sensitivity that enhances his piloting.
In the thought process.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in the thought vein or thought process of everyone has a connection to the force. It flows through all of us, kind of a thing.
But slightly elevated.
To me, first of all, one of the things I did to prepare for this was I watched the J.J. Abrams commentary track on the movie after I watched the whole movie. So I kind of watched it twice, but more listening the second time. And I have major disagreements with J.J. Abrams as a filmmaker. I thought he destroyed Star Wars. I hated what he did with Star Wars. I despise Rise of Return of Palpatine or whatever.
Rise of Skywalker.
Whatever the hell that movie is called. It's just so bad. I don't want to talk about it. But I will say there's a number of things I got. I feel like I had a better understanding of his approach to Star Wars, even if I disagree with it, listening to the commentary track. And he specifically says we wanted a non-force sensitive person who was just a kick-ass pilot.
Boo. Boo, J.J. Abrams. Boo.
But you and I aren't force sensitive. We can't relate to that. I don't want all the people to be great, to be force people, because then it makes the fact that Finn is supposed to be force sensitive in the third movie a lot less special. But also it just means that why do we bother with Han Solo or Chewbacca if the best people at everything are always force sensitive and there's always going to be a force sensitive person around? Then just to hell with all the rest of the characters.
I see that point of view. Is you want there to still be someone that's super relatable that, in a world of mystical things that don't exist.
Yeah.
He just did. I think for me, it's just that there's being a good pilot, and then the shit that Finn would do, that Poe would do, just seemed to be almost too good. Han was a great pilot. We've seen great pilots in Star Wars, but just the way that he was able to maneuver and shoot things, it always to me felt almost like it was too perfect and too good.
I want to say Han is a great pilot, but Han is a fucking messy pilot.
He is.
Nothing he does looks nice or is clean. I feel like Poe is very clean with his flying.
And that was my point. That I don't know. It just, to me, that's why I always felt that way, because it felt like it was almost just a little too good.
I feel like Poe is supposed to be as good as Wedge, and if Poe is
Poe's better than Wedge. That's the problem.
I mean, Wedge, it's like we never saw someone go up against 12 TIE fighters. Like
Right.
it's so much an apples to orange comparison.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that I do think we're supposed to think the Force, like the First Order is still kind of in secret off on the edge of the galaxy. They don't have the training resources that the Empire does. And I think their TIE fighter pilots are probably nowhere near as good.
They did just kidnap children and force them into servitude, so it's probably fair.
Mm-hmm.
First
Well,
Order
I mean,
way.
in the Clone Wars, child soldiers got the job done. But
Yes, but the child soldiers were genetically engineered. These are just kids kidnapped out of their homes.
okay, facts.
So let's talk about the First Order.
Let's.
Yes. But
What did you all think of that storyline of the First Order, the Republic, and the Resistance? And I was too young to care about it, or I just didn't care about it because lightsaber is cool is a perfectly legitimate answer.
it made sense to me.
For me, I mean, I certainly didn't think about it back then. Like, honestly, by the end of the movie, I forgot about the Republic. I truly did. Like,
I mean, they got blown up so far.
it no longer applied to me. But yeah, rewatching it, I do kind of sit there and I'm like, wait, but if the Republic exists and the ruling power is not evil, why do we need another good power of people? I was like, So I see that it is a little convoluted. It doesn't make that much sense because it's clear that the Republic was there to be destroyed as a way to make Starkiller Base and as a way to make the First Order menacing and scary. And then you can't just blow up every planet of the Republic and then somehow have people to fight back against the First Order. So I understand they kind of like just set it up as such, but I found it interesting that like Leia, who helped found the New Republic, was like, actually, I'm going to do an offshoot and I'm a general now. I mean, like, fucking get it. Like, go Leia, go. Love her. She's a badass general. But it was thinking on it more, it is a little confusing of like, so what did happen with the New Republic? Then again, in the Mando series, we're seeing there's a lot of bullshit that happened with the New Republic.
Right.
Right. I mean, to me, it always made sense because the way I saw it was that, Project Cinder was put into place, which was like, the fallout plan from the Empire getting destroyed. And like the Empire was vast. And I mean, we've seen that, like we've seen the remnants of it existing. And so like the fact that like it was able to rebuild, and remember, this is happening, 20 something years after the end of Return of the Jedi, maybe longer, 30 years.
30 years.
30 years. That's a lot of time to like rebuild and amass. I mean, you think about the fact that like from like when the whole Empire's existence was less than 30 years.
Yeah.
So like I think it made sense to like these remnants, these people who still believe in the Empire were able to like build up this force. And the Republic, was young again. It was kind of getting their shit together. They're trying to put out dissidents. And to me, the Resistance was kind of like their military arm, militia kind of deal. And like they were resisting against, the First Order and this pushback, this rising threat that they know. I mean, they've known, you can see in Mando, they know that like there are still dissidents and Empire sympathizers that exist. And I think that Resistance was just like this offshoot of the rebellion and the military arm of the Republic. The only thing to me was it was a little silly that it was called the Resistance because they are just a military arm of the Republic. But like, it fits well,
Yeah.
I guess.
See,
I mean, I think they're very specifically not supposed to be connected to, like, the Republic is secretly funding them, and
Right.
that's like they're not supposed to be doing that. They're very much not the military of the Republic.
But they are. Like they're not officially, but they are at the same time because like at no point, unless literally when the First Order blew up the Republic, every warship that ever existed in the Republic were just in that system. I mean, where was the rest of the warships then? And the rest of the
well, that is something that they said in this movie is like the Republic fleets can't help us because most of them got blown up.
Yeah, they distinctly say there's a Republic fleet that's separate from it, and I agree with you. I think that's one of the massive plot holes of the movie is that it doesn't make sense that like the entire fleet was around this one system of planets that got destroyed.
Right. So I guess like not the official arm, but I guess like the undercover arm, like funding rebels. I mean,
it's kind of like Mon Mothma and Luthen.
Yeah.
I think here's the way I look at it. I think at the time, it just didn't make sense, and it felt like one of the things that my friends and I had always been talking about, and I think is a very interesting story, is once an authoritarian government has fallen, how do you take over and both not have complete chaos, but also not become authoritarian yourself? Like, to me, that's a very interesting story. And I think that was part of what I wanted out of these movies. And it felt like a bit of a cop-out to go back immediately to the main power is the bad guys and we're the good guys, etc. But I get why they wanted to do it, because they wanted to copy A New Hope. I think like I hear, Alex, you're trying to kind of square the circle with Operation Cinder and some of the other stuff. I think in this movie it doesn't make sense, and we just kind of have to accept that. But that,
I mean,
I do think that a lot of the other content that's come since then, like The Mandalorian, like all the stuff we're talking about, Operation Cinder, but also a lot of stuff that's happened in the books. Like, one of the things the books lay out is actually that when it's revealed that Leia is the child of Vader, that she is driven out of government because people are just so like, oh, you can't. The book Bloodlines, which we did a review of, is very good, and it talks about that.
Wasn't Mon Mothma the first chancellor after everything settled?
No, Leia wasn't a chancellor, but Leia was like one of the leading senators and was in line to become. Well, there are various versions, because in this there wasn't a strong chancellor at first because the government wanted to be very like decentralized.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's where I'm going with it. I do think, though, that there is a very legitimate story that I think you can see this as a mirror of, that certainly has happened historically, and that also, and I don't know if J.J. Abrams meant this, but I think is a very powerful political metaphor for its time as well. Which is that one of the things that has often happened, Weimar Germany is one of the best examples of this, is that when you have a democracy that wants to, it's the paradox of tolerance, that wants to let everyone participate. When one group starts to say, we're going to participate, but actively try to overthrow you, people don't want to stop them because, well, then we're censoring them. Then we're not allowing their free speech. And
this is getting too real.
Weimar tried to treat the Nazis as though they were a legitimate party until the Nazis took over. And at the time this movie was being made, we were in the later years of the Obama administration. More and more people on the right were making it very clear that they were not planning to play by the rules anymore. They wanted to have, basically what we wound up having under Trump. And the Obama administration, no matter how much people on the left screamed at them to do something, was like, no, they're just one more political party. We can work with them. We can reach across the aisle, all this stuff. Now, granted, I'm coming from a very specific political point, but I think this is what the movie is a metaphor for, or at least can be seen that way. And the resistance is those people who are like, well, officially we're not supposed to be fighting against these people, but we're going to go off and do that. And I think we need to keep watching the TV show Resistance, because season 1 of it actually really makes that clear, is that you'll get arrested by the Republic if you're officially known to be part of the resistance. And it may well be kind of like the CIA supporting like terrorist group, like resistance fighter groups or terrorist groups, depending on your point of view. Point of all this is anyway, that I think that I really didn't like it when it came out after I'd kind of gotten past my initial euphoria about the movie. I think they have done a good job with everything else of making it make sense in a way that I think really makes the movie a lot better. The same way the Clone Wars made the third prequel a lot better.
Star Wars backfill and never fails.
And I think that it's a really powerful political allegory that is worth taking a look at.
Yeah, that's what I want to add something quickly to that, Matthew, in that I can't remember if I read it or watched a documentary on the making of the movie, but the scene on Star Killer Base when Hux is giving his crazy speech, the designers, I'm not joking, quite literally took an image from Nazi Germany of a rally that Hitler was speaking at, and then literally he just said, and I replaced the Nazis with stormtroopers and replaced Hitler with Hux. It was quite literally a historical image that he just turned into the scene. So it was very clearly the Nazis were used as the template for this first order imagery.
Well, and at the time the movie was made out, there wasn't Trump yet he was sort of on the political scene, but he wasn't running for office. I'm going to take that out. And at the time that the movie was being made, one of the things that we were most concerned about wasn't Nazis. It was neo-Nazis.
Right.
Who were a lot of kids and young adults kind of playing dress up with the ideas of their grandfathers. And so I think that Kylo Ren kind of trying to be Darth Vader, it was very intentional of like, he's the
Ooh,
neo-Nazi
good
playing
reference.
dress up literally with his grandfather's old helmet.
And all the stormtroopers are not clones or volunteers anymore. They are children who were kidnapped and then brainwashed. So like very much intentionality of like brainwashing the youth to build this army. Like, yeah, for sure. In a less political tone, I just want to note my last point on the First Order, at least, was in this movie specifically, Hux I thought was badass and like very cool. I had very high hopes for his character. And Phasma and the Knights of Ren, such a waste of potential. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I thought at the time. What?
Go ahead.
I thought at the time that Phasma and the Knights of Ren were like the coolest looking, most badass looking things I've like ever seen in Star Wars. And they like each appeared for like, I mean, Phasma appeared for like 2 scenes briefly, and Knights of Ren appeared in 1 flashback, and then we like really barely got them in future movies. But again, we'll talk about that another time. But I just wanted, they were featured in the trailer. I wanted so much more of them. I felt like there was just missed opportunities to use both of those character groups more.
And we're going to specifically talk about the plot lines that this movie set up and how they were not paid off in the second 2 movies as part of the bonus member section, which is a good time to say that if you want to become a member, it's $25 a month, $55 a year. It's a great way to help support the podcast. You get that bonus content at the end of every episode. You get bonus member episodes. We just did an episode on Darth Plagueis, the novel, which is very relevant to the TV show The Acolyte. Definitely check that out. And also you just get to help keep the lights on. So please check out all those things. Of course, you can also send us feedback, email, Facebook, Messenger, all those kind of things. All that's in the show notes. Please check all those things out. Back to this, though. Let's now start talking about some of the individual characters. What do you guys think of Kylo Ren?
Erin, I've talked a lot. You go.
Okay. So Kylo Ren coming out of the gate, I was like, holy shit. Like, who is this? Like, this is crazy. We got another Vader situation here, right? And then the unfolding of who he actually is, you know, Ben, Han and Leia's son and all that. It's very interesting. One thing I noticed about him is we often joke in the fandom about like his temper tantrums, basically, because that's what they are. He has temper tantrums. But I remember the first time watching it being like, this is so scary. This is just like what Vader did when he would like choke people out. No, Vader was a lot more calm, cool, collected, but also not that cool or calm because he was choking people out over FaceTime. But he did it in a classy way. Kylo Ren was like, I'm just gonna like be a baby and like meh, meh, meh. So it became very clear, not on the first watch, because I was like, this is scary. It became pretty clear that he was so like immature.
Yeah.
And the first time he took his face off, dude, his mask off. I was so disappointed. Like 13-year-old Erin was not at all into Adam Driver. I was like, who is this baby ass man? He literally looks like a teenager, which I realize is probably the point now. But as a teenager, I was looking for something like hot and smoldery and sexy. And to me, Adam Driver was not it. But the character itself, very interesting. And the whole kind of like annihilation and what happened with Luke and, you know, the Knights of Ren, which by the way, totally forgot they were in this movie until you brought it up, Alex. Like I don't think I ever knew that they were in this movie because it's such a little moment. Like I've just never paid super close attention. But yeah, those are kind of my initial thoughts on Kylo. Like so scary at first, really good villain. It is hard because of how much he's mocked online that I've come to take him less seriously as a villain. So then as I was rewatching it this time around, I was trying really to like center myself back within the movie of like, nope, like this is what I am seeing. This is what I'm learning about the characters. And it was kind of nice to see him as more of like an actual scary villain again. And just seeing that mental battle between him and Rey for the first time in a while was really cool.
Yeah.
Adam Driver.
What are your thoughts?
One of my favorite actors, and I would say, and I think from the get-go, I loved Kylo Ren. I was obsessed. I thought that like he portrayed the character well. I thought as an Anakin lover, I think this makes sense. I don't think anyone's surprised here. He gave Anakin like tantrumy vibes. Like,
Mhm.
he was just very like, this lost, confused kid. I can picture like, you grow up in the shadow of Han Solo and Leia Organa, like two of the legends of the rebellion and of the Republic, and being Luke Skywalker's nephew. Like, it's just like you grew up in this like royal family in the New Republic, and I think that, again, being whispered to by Snoke / Palpatine this whole time, like,
We're only talking about the first movie, so as far as we know, it is Snoke.
okay, sorry, I'll re-say that. Being whispered to by Snoke this whole time, like this powerful dark side user, I think that like it like further showed his like frustration, his doubts, his feeling small. Like, it's like any kid in real life talks about like what it's like to grow up with like a really famous parent. And they don't want to be associated with them a lot of the time. They want to have their own life. And so his rebellion made sense to me. His obsession with Vader fascinated me because, like you talked about, Matthew, like that deification of his grandfather and like trying to go after that power. Like, I don't know. His character always really interested me. And I also liked it because you could very clearly see the conflict in him throughout the movie. Like, he was, doubting himself a lot, very vulnerable, like showed his fear very visibly. Sometimes it was just his facial expressions. Like, I thought the acting was spot on. I don't know. Kylo always interested me. And I also thought his lightsaber was very, very cool when I was 18 years old. And I still do. I thought his lightsaber was very scary and very fun. That's my take.
Yeah, I think he's a very interesting character. I think I had only known Adam Driver from Girls, the TV show Lena Dunham, in which he's basically playing like an adolescent man-child. Like, he's supposed to be a guy in his 20s, but he still acts like a 17-year-old guy.
So the same character.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Without a lightsaber.
It was hard for me to take him seriously, but I think when I realized that's kind of the point, is that he is I think he's supposed to be the 17-year-old who has access to power far beyond what he should, whether it's an assault rifle or a lightsaber. And he is terrifying in a very different way from Vader, because Vader is ice cold and I have no care in the world. And it's I don't think Vader gets mad at the people and then kills them out of anger. I think he decides they are ineffective tools and he throws the tool away so that he can pick up another tool. And like, in some ways that's worse, maybe. But in Kylo, at least, like, Kylo doesn't kill the guy who gives him that bad news. He just destroys his own shit, which is like kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Damn. Wait,
but also
Matthew,
he's kind of horrible as well.
You can cut this out, but you just like unlocked something in my brain. And I just want to thank you for that. I never considered that Anakin, being like a little techie boy growing up, always tinkering with things, then saw humans as tools like they were when he was a kid making droids. And that's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I think
that just kind of blew my mind for a minute. I was like, damn, he just started seeing humans as actual tools like he was a kid again. Oh, wow. That deepens the psyche of him so much for me. Okay, I'm sorry. You can cut that. That was just crazy. Thank you.
No, I think it's very astute. Like, I think that there's some descriptions of that, like, one of the descriptions of the dark side, but also just like leading you into a really kind of like bad moral place, is when you start seeing other people as NPCs.
Yeah.
That like their value is what role they play in your story, not the idea that they have their own sort of inherent moral value. And I think that's where Soul goes to. That's where Anakin goes to. That's where Rey goes to.
That's crazy. And Kylo's not there yet.
Kylo's moving in that direction for sure. That's what part of the movie is. I just want to say something about the thing with Vader, which is that, first of all, I do think that Star Wars, like, the line is history becomes legend, legend becomes myth. And Star Wars just wants to like skip over that, and with the 500-year process happen in 20 years. And it doesn't make sense in the prequels, and it doesn't make sense here. In terms of like, Rey being like, did the Jedi really exist? Like, it was 30 years ago. It wasn't 500 years ago. But what I did believe is the idea that everyone remembers Vader because for whatever reason, Luke never told everybody about Anakin coming back. Like or he did, but that's just not the part of the story that gets repeated, because the really scary villain is a lot more interesting than the scary villain who actually had a good side or whatever.
Yeah.
Because it feels to me like it's very clear that Kylo is worshiping Vader.
Mm-hmm.
He's either doing the thing where he's like ignoring the part of the story so that he can deify the guy, where Anakin kills the Emperor, or he just doesn't know about it.
I don't think he knows.
Yeah.
Because looking at that scene, I think it's kind of funny. It's like, I feel like Kylo Ren is like, I am communing with my grandfather. And Anakin's sitting there like, no, God, no. You're misunderstanding everything. I'm not going to talk to you. Because, like you said, Anakin came back to the light at the end. So it's like,
right.
He wouldn't be.
I just want to say real quick, I do personally fully buy into the fact that like the Jedi were kind of mythical at this point. I mean, it's been 30 years since Luke Skywalker, but remember, the Jedi were killed off 50 years ago, and Rey is living far in the outer rim.
No,
where
she
they're
specifically says that Han Solo and Luke Skywalker are myths.
Yeah, but okay, so even 30 years, you're living in it like she wasn't born when these events had happened. You know, it's like living out in the outer rim. It's like living, I mean, if I'm being honest, I mean, it's like living out in the middle of like rural America where your access to information is greatly limited. You just kind of hear stories from passing star pilots. And so
I
to
promise
me,
you they've heard of Abraham Lincoln.
well, Rey specifically, I'm saying it's not Abraham Lincoln. It's like, I don't know. I think Rey specifically hearing about if you lived in the middle of a farmland and all you knew was like this desert world and you had no access really to the outside world, and then someone told you that there's some like guy who can move shit with his mind and wield a laser sword that you've never seen before, I would think that's a myth. I don't know. I think like with limited information and the description, Han Solo, I get that's less makes sense to me. But like if I heard a Jedi was real, I would say, yeah, okay, buddy.
That's fair.
Okay.
That's fair.
Big deal. Yeah, I feel like the only thing that's hard to compare it to like anything here on Earth is that it is a galaxy, not an Earth. And that is like, it's a vastness I can't imagine. I don't know what it's like to have other species and have other planets you can travel to. I don't know what the information communique would be like. I think it's
green.
It doesn't feel like it's consistent. Because then, like at the end of Return of the Jedi, everyone knows all of a sudden. Like I just wish they were consistent with it, but it's I meant it more as a joke, not something to take.
No,
like,
fair.
So what I want to talk about, like we talked a lot about Kylo. We haven't talked much about Rey, but I want to kind of reiterate, like I love Rey's character. I think that her growth is a really interesting story, particularly because she, in some ways, she's the exact opposite of Luke. All Luke wants to do is get away, and then when he finds himself like pulled back into is the story of his family, which he does to leave Tatooine, but it's still about his family. For Rey, I think I never really saw much until this viewing of the movie, how much the struggle really is about. Can she let go of that hope of finding her family, of her family coming back to her, so that she can go on and accept the family that she's finding of Han and Chewie and Rey and Poe and all the Finn and Poe and all the rest of them.
Yeah, I had kind of forgotten about that aspect that she so badly wanted to go back to Jakku. Why does everyone want to go back to Jakku? You know?
Yeah.
Until this watch around, and I was like, oh, that's right. And then I was like, why is she still torn up about this? And I was watching the acting, and I was like, damn, she really believes they're coming back. Like, obviously, I know that's not going to happen, but like, just reconnecting with the character's motivations, like, it's been nice. I agree. It's a really well portrayed character.
I mean, yeah, we don't know at this point, but like, I feel like if I was a kid, I would believe my parents were going to come back eventually if that had happened to me. Also, I don't know. When I was first watching this movie, and I wrote a lot of this down, maybe it was just me, but I felt like they were really pushing. I know that in later movies we learned other things, but they pushing that she was either related to Obi-Wan or Luke in some way. They're like hinting and dancing around it a lot. I had convinced myself that she was related to like Obi-Wan's granddaughter for so many reasons.
Well, yeah, because she does hear his voice when she like sees the lightsaber.
She hears both Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor's voice. They brought Ewan McGregor in just for one line, which I was like, why would they do that? Also, Finn and Daisy Ridley, John Boyega and Daisy Ridley, both British actors. They made Finn lose the accent, not Rey. Like, Obi-Wan has a British accent. I don't know. It's just there was
Mhm.
so much to me that like lined up with that. And then like, you know, I don't know. And then like even also Maz Kanata said to her, the line is, you know, whoever you're waiting for on Jakku is not coming back, but there's someone that still could.
Yeah.
And then she said, and then Rey's like, Luke. And I'm like, what do you mean come back? She's never met Luke once. Does that mean that Luke knows her? Then I was convinced that like Luke had trained her and like wiped her memory or something. Like, I don't. There were some lines that were just very confusing in this movie about Rey's past, and I'm sure it was intentional. But I left the movie thinking, is she Obi-Wan's granddaughter? Was she trained by Luke? Is she no one? What is happening here?
So
I mean, good.
just real quick, the line you mentioned, I actually interpreted that in a completely different way. Like
Please
when
tell me.
Maz says, like, there's still someone who could. Like, they're not coming back, there's someone who could. Like, she's talking about Finn. Because Finn just
Yeah.
left her. Like, in my mind, that's who she's talking about.
Yeah, it's
But Rey
100% about
responds
Finn.
and says Luke directly after that. She says Luke.
And Maz doesn't say yes. I think Rey's wrong. And Maz doesn't say
Yeah,
yes.
no, Maz specifically made. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that Maz meant Finn. And
I have
to
never
say,
once thought that. That's crazy.
we'll post all of Alex's
wild.
description because he does predict some things fantastically.
Thank you.
But reading it, I very much saw you as that guy in front of the board with all the red tape.
Oh, that was me.
And first of all, it is for me essential to the story that Obi-Wan never had sex with Satine. Like, I think that I don't want Corky to ever show up. I think it'd be such a betrayal of his character.
I am so pro Corky.
Also, I cannot take seriously a character named Corky Kenobi. No.
Dude, come on, Corky Kenobi. That
Corky
was like my blood is my child. I was like, this is 100% the child of Ben Kenobi. And
That
now
character
Rey
exists in Young Jedi Adventures only.
Oh my god.
Unless Anakin goes forward in time just to kill that kid. And we get to see that kid Order 66 at 8 years old in a brutal fashion.
Damn.
Jesus.
For being a violation of the canon in the most awful way.
Oh my
Anyway,
God.
though, not that I have strong opinions about this.
Not at all.
We'll talk more about this in the bonus section, but I think we should all agree, whatever we think of Abrams' vision and Johnson's vision, there was a failure on some level to get the two of them together and have a cohesive idea of what happens in these three movies. Because I think Rey is three different characters, and Kylo Ren is three different characters, and Luke is like at the end. And he made this before Last Jedi came out. This wasn't him like slamming on Rian Johnson. At the end of the commentary track, he says, like, we love that moment because we know this is the moment when Luke is going to accept his old lightsaber and return to the fight. And I was like, oh, that's not where it goes, friend.
Yikes.
And you can argue about that. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, I think I want to be very careful about, like, we can't jump too far down any one of those rabbit holes. I think, though, for me, though, again, it is, I don't want everyone to be connected. It's why I hate the whole Palpatine thing. I don't, it to me, it just makes the world so small if we think she's got to be connected to Obi-Wan or to Leia or, the secret love child of Lando Calrissian and Anakin's, sister on Tatooine or whatever the heck it is.
Hey, man, the secret love child of Lando Calrissian we'll talk about in another film.
Oh,
Didn't like that. That. We'll get there.
Let me ask a question, Matthew. As the older guard among us of the original characters,
Sure.
did it bother you that in this movie, after like really pushing and pubbing the fact, the old cast is coming back, that we never got Luke in the trailer, that the first thing you saw on screen was that Luke Skywalker had vanished, and you only get him for like 30 seconds at the very end of the movie?
Not the slightest.
Not at all.
I had Luke's story. Luke's story was done.
Fair enough.
I was very much ready for new people's stories.
Fair enough.
And I think most of that had been spoiled anyway. And certainly the fact that Han was probably going to die.
Oh, I dodged all of that shit.
In part because everyone knew Harrison Ford only wanted to do one movie, and then only came back in the third because Carrie Fisher passed away. So no, I think I was fine with that, and I liked the story of him going away. And this brings us to, I think, one of the most interesting parts of the movie, Kylo killing Han Solo. And I want to get back to the Kylo and Rey of it all, but let's just talk about this. What did you all think about the way Kylo kills Rey? I'm sorry, the way Kylo kills Han.
Kylo killed Rey. Spoiler alert.
Oh no.
Erin, go please.
It's very odd. I mean, I think when I was watching it back today, I was trying to figure out if he knows what he's going to do the whole time, or if that's a conclusion he comes to along the way. When he says, I know what I have to do, can you help me do it? I'm like, he's talking about, I have to kill you, you know, to become one with the dark side and all that good stuff. And so, yeah, it just felt like an odd backhanded thing to do. But also, I mean, I was not surprised. I'm sitting there in the theater like, Han, back the fuck up. Why are you going up to this dude who has a lightsaber and kills people? But also, after all these years, Han is back with Leia, and that's the one thing she asks him to do, is bring their son home.
Yeah.
And so
here's the journey I've gone on with this scene.
Oh no.
Okay.
When I saw it, I was convinced that Han had flipped the switch and twisted it. Because I at first I thought that it was always pointing at him. It's not. It's pointing to the side.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that where Han's hands were, like his hands are on where the activation switch should be, and he sort of flips the switch and turns the lightsaber towards him. And
interesting.
The idea of that being that he's come to realize that Kylo has to kill him, that if he doesn't, Snoke is going to kill Kylo, but that if Kylo does actually kill Han Solo himself, that he'll be fully lost to the dark side. And so Han kind of like, that's how Han helps, is he doesn't make Kylo do the actual killing, which protects Kylo from fully falling to the dark side. And I never loved that because it felt like it was very sort of metaphysical, how many angels could dance on the head of the dark side kind of a thing. After seeing the Acolyte and some of the other stuff, I got more and more away from it. And like, yes, Kylo is like, clearly this is a moment where Kylo gets a lot closer to the dark side. But this whole idea of like that if he'd actually pushed the button, that therefore he would have been like fully on the dark side and Rey couldn't have pulled him back at all. That all was feeling more and more like bright lines when the whole point is that the Force is so nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
And here I'll admit, J.J. Abrams finally at least told me what he understood of it. And I think sometimes a filmmaker cannot understand their own movie. I think it's perfectly fine if we have a very different reading of what even the director or the writer says they meant. But here I think, because he pointed out something I'd never seen before, which is that it's getting darker,
Mm-hmm.
and then it fully gets dark, which is the moment when the sun, the star, has been fully extinguished. The weapon has been charged and darkness fully falls. And it's now only the artificial light in that area where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a change on Kylo Ren's face, and then Kylo does it. And like that was what changed. It's not that Han Solo did it. It's that he was wrestling with it. Han was trying to help him not have to do it. To what he should be do is to turn on Snoke. And then darkness falls. He turns on his father. He kills his father. And then almost immediately he regrets it. And that's what because yes, he does kill his father, but he regrets it. And that's what sets him up to be able to listen to Rey, at least somewhat, in the second and third movies.
Yeah, for me, I avoided the spoiler, so I didn't know it was coming. I thought it was going to come just because I don't know, I just had this kind of weird gut feeling in my belly. But like when he goes out when it goes out on that walkway, I mean, first of all, clearly the Resistance the First Order did not learn from the Empire to put railings on freaking walkways.
Which, by the way, J.J. Abrams specifically said, we have 2 characters on a walkway with no railing, so you know someone's going to die.
Yeah, literally.
I love the way he's
Crazy
acknowledging that we
Crazy
need
behavior.
OSHA, which we finally get.
But to me, the scene just like, I mean, it made me cry at the time. I was very emotional. I still feel very emotional watching it. But it's hard for me because like they're having this moment, and the fact that like Chewbacca doesn't like have his bowcaster trained on Kylo. I guess maybe like because Kylo was a kid that he grew up with, he didn't feel like he could shoot him unless something crazy happened. I don't know. Like it felt like a very fantastic scene for that to all happen like that. But it felt like Han always felt so right for Han's character for me. Like showing nothing but love and care to the final moment, like showing that like we all know under that like scruffy, nerf herder outside, he was a big softie. He always was, always will be. And like he loved Kylo so much. And so I don't know, like that part always made sense to me. Kylo, the only thing that ever bothered me about that scene was physically the way the lightsaber was turned. Like they just make such a point of showing this turn to the side, and they don't show enough of a turn of the handle. Suddenly he just is lunging forward and it's through Han. So unless you, like you said, Matthew, Han like helped him turn it or something like that happened, it feels harder for me to grasp how Han would have been taken by surprise in that moment and having the lightsaber turn like that. I don't know, but emotional, it still hits for me. I thought it was like well done. I think both actors acted very exceptionally well emotion-wise. You see Kylo's contemplation, you see his regret, you see Han's unwavering love. It was just part of the actual execution of the murder felt sloppy to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yes. I had many other things I wanted to bring up. Just in the aftermath of this, the lightsaber fight. Can we talk about the lightsaber fight?
Between
between all of them,
Kylo.
between Rey and Finn. I'm sorry, Finn and Kylo, and then Kylo and Rey. But I understand that Kylo was injured, but to even be slightly struck by Finn, who had never held a lightsaber more than that one time a day ago, 2 days ago, was always unbelievable to me. Again, I recognize he's injured, but like still crazy.
Well, I think there's two key things you're missing.
Sorry, still wild. Apologize.
I think they established, to me, when Finn fights the soldier, the stormtrooper, who has a sword-like device attached to his arm, I think that's Chekhov's sword. That's Chekhov's stormtrooper sword. That is showing that stormtroopers have some experience with weapons like lightsabers.
Fair, that's fair.
But the second thing is, I think Kylo is 100% toying with him, and again, this is something Abrams confirmed, but I thought it before. Like, Kylo is pissed at himself. He's pissed at everything. He's so conflicted in his head, and he's so in the dark side. He could force push this guy off the cliff.
Right.
He could stab him through. He's like, let's make this fun.
Yeah.
You know?
And also, he's probably very unbalanced after just killing his dad. So I guess if you look at it that way, that's probably fair. In a positive light, I would say that I never knew I needed a lightsaber duel at night in a snowstorm until I saw this.
So cool.
Strictly visually speaking, choreography, everything, nothing else. That is the most visually beautiful lightsaber fight, I think, in all of Star Wars. Just like the glow of the lightsabers in the darkness, the snow falling around them, I thought was just visually stunning. The sizzling of the snow hitting, it's just
the sound of when she drives his lightsaber into the snow is just incredible.
So and the choreography was great, but I'm just saying, strictly visuals, to me, that is the most stunning lightsaber duel. And the thing that always kind of bothered me a little bit, and this is, again, you'll always see my ramblings that Matthew's going to post, but it always threw me off that Rey had never been trained. She had her staff, and so she had practiced on her own. I get that. But as she's fighting, Kylo was toying with her. But there's a moment. She's backed up to the cliff. He's holding the lightsaber down on her, and he says, you need a teacher. I can show you the ways of the Force. And it's something clicks in her brain. She's like, the Force. She closes her eyes. She breathes in, and suddenly she's a different fighter. She's more accurate. She's on the attack. She pushes him back. And I'm sure it catches Kylo by surprise. But back in 2015, that is why I was so firmly a believer that she had been trained by Luke and he put a Force mind wipe on her or something, because I was like, how does Rey suddenly go to this super confident, powerful being? And one thing I know,
the same way that Luke goes from being a pilot who thinks he needs to use the targeting computer to literally the exact same process. I'm not blaming you here for this, but this is why I get so angry at the idiots who say Rey didn't have. Rey does exactly the same things Luke does.
Yeah.
Rey
Right.
closes his eyes, hears Obi-Wan's voice, and all of a sudden he knows exactly how to use the Force to shoot the proton torpedoes.
But to be fair, at least Obi-Wan gave him a little bit of explanation of what the Force was. A little, it wasn't much, but he had, like, Luke had a teeny bit of understanding. Rey understood like none of this. She had not spoken to a Jedi. She had not heard of a Jedi a week ago. So, like, yes, I agree with that. But, like, it just felt a little harder that suddenly she was skilled specifically with a lightsaber. But
but you're wrong. She had heard Obi-Wan. You just said that 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, but she heard these are your first steps. She hadn't been trained by him for a week.
I think this is when we're trying to argue the metaphysics of the Force. It doesn't work that way. People awaken to I know that you're not doing this, but it's kind of like you're standing very close to really terrible people with these arguments. So I always want to kind of push back on it. Like, because so much of the Rey doesn't have enough training comes from such a sexist place. I know that's not you, but I think it's very important to be like, no, this is utterly untrue.
No,
she has the exact same amount of training that Luke does, and very intentionally the exact same kind of power sets that he does.
No, and that's fair. I don't want to get deep into it, but I do think it's like Luke spoke with someone. He heard, he had the blaster ball. He was being trained. Let the Force flow through you. Like, I just don't like, did Rey know enough about the Force at this point to do all that? Was always like I just wanted like one scene where like she either heard more of Obi-Wan or she like talked to Maz more, something where like it felt like the Force was never even fully explained to her, really. So, like, I don't know.
I'm just going to gently suggest the fact that you don't question that with Luke, but you do with Rey, I think is something worth examining. Because I think the only difference is their gender.
I did question it with Luke, though, to be fair. Like, when he shoots into
Can
the
I
Death
say
Star
something?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, it's okay. So the way that I interpret that moment for Rey is that, like, yeah, she's never been taught about the Force. She doesn't know what it's about. But when Kylo was interrogating her, she realized something. And she realized she could fight back.
Yeah.
And I think she didn't understand what she realized until he brought it up and said, I can show you the ways of the Force. And she was like, oh, that was the Force? Okay. And she kind of tapped in, and it's the idea of Luke with the blinder helmet over his head of let the Force guide you. Just kind of say, fuck it and let it go. You know, Jesus take the wheel style is how I kind of interpreted it, is that she didn't understand. And then something clicked, but it's not that she had knowledge. It's that she had trust in the Force, which is starting to sound very Christian. But that's probably just because of my background. That's saying, like, you should trust in the Force. It's like, you should trust in God. But yeah, that's how I always interpreted that little moment for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that very much like, because I think people like, to me, if you're going to raise any of these complaints, the idea that Luke kind of fights Vader to a standstill when Vader and Anakin have been fighting with lightsabers for 20 years and he's been doing it for maybe a week. In both cases, Vader and Kylo are not trying to kill the other person. Mm-hmm. They're trying specifically to recruit them. Like when he said, like, because there's a part of you that's like, why doesn't he just kill her when she's closing her eyes and like meditating for a second? I think that's bad filmmaking. I think it should have been done a little different way to explain like why she's able to take that moment. But I think it's also like, I think you do see him like being like, what's going on? I'm more curious now. Mm-hmm. He wants to train her. He wants to recruit her. He's not trying to kill her.
Yeah.
To be fair, that did also bother me back when I saw, like, it bothered me that Anakin wasn't kicking Luke's ass more as well. I think maybe across the board, I get bothered when people can just automatically use the Force so
just
quickly.
Are automatically good at stuff.
Like, I'm not trying to say that it's just Rey or it's Luke, but like Ezra does it. So many Jedi do this, and it just bothers me that like no training, suddenly you can just. And I get like it's the whole like trust in yourself and the Force flows through its thing, but like it's just such a leap, and maybe it just catches the other party off guard. But like you said, Vader's been using a lightsaber for 30 years, and Kylo's been training forever long, and Ezra fighting people that have been training forever, and like all these Jedi suddenly can just fight so well. It's always thrown me off.
I get it, Alex. You're a wizard. And like all wizards who've studied for years, you're really bitter at the sorcerers
I
who
am.
just have this magical power inherently.
I am.
And the warlocks who have their magical sugar daddies and sugar mamas. But,
I do play a sorcerer in D&D, but it always pisses off my friends. But the last thing I want to say just on this quickly was that I actually interpreted it even more beyond that. I think Rey taps a little bit into the dark side. And in the novelization of The Force Awakens, it describes that she hears a voice telling her to finish Kylo off when she knocks him down.
Mhm.
The official novelization that Disney approved. Doesn't say if it's Snoke, doesn't say who it is, just says that she hears a voice egging her on basically to finish Kylo when she knocks him down and slash his face.
It was my voice in the theater. Fucking finish him! Take him down! Bitch, this is your chance!
I mean, I feel like a lot of people felt that. If she looked angry, and to me, like, that was like her first moment feeling the dark side and then winning, like fighting back against it and being like, no, I'm going to reject this, which was like, something I don't think Kylo was capable of doing. It's what separates her from Kylo Ren, and that Kylo Ren hears that voice. He wants to, maybe he does or doesn't, but he wants to finish the person. Rey says, no, I'm not going to, kill this unarmed person. I've beaten you. You're beaten. I won.
Yeah.
Well,
and remember, this is when we're starting to explore these questions of, is the idea of the light side and the dark side always so black and white? Because remember, Rey does, she shoots force lightning at later points. She dives deep into the dark side in ways that terrify Luke. Ezra uses the force in ways that are dark side, but then pulls back some.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and again, I hate to keep quoting Abrams because I think he's just a really bad filmmaker, but I think understanding where he's coming from helped me understand this movie.
Mm-hmm.
He said that very specifically they wanted her to have that moment of, should I kill him, knowing that it's not the Jedi way, but she's not been taught that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very intentional that she's like, a part of her wants to do it, a part of her's hesitating, and then the chasm opens up so that she can't.
Yeah.
And I really like that we're supposed to feel like, yes, she's hesitating, but yes, she hasn't fully convinced herself not to, but then the opportunity is taken away.
Yeah, when the chasm opened, I always saw it as well, now she can't. We'll never know if she was going to or if she wasn't going to.
Also, I screamed when when he reached for the lightsaber and got to Rey instead.
Oh, that was so
I stood up and cheered.
I screamed. Also, not only because it went to Rey, but because it was the biggest. You just know that Kylo felt that so deep down that his grandfather's lightsaber he'd been seeking for so long, his quote unquote birthright, just fucking rejected his ass for Rey. He was like, absolutely not. I'm going to a worthy person, and it's not you. And he looked so devastated and shocked. And he was just like, God fucking damn it. He whips out his lightsaber. I cannot believe this.
He really did. Let me pause for a second. It's almost 7:00, and I wanted to be done by now. And I know we have a lot more to talk about, including the bonus section, but also just a lot more about this movie. Do we want to make this the end of part 1?
2 parts.
I'm okay with that.
I'd be fine with that.
If you guys have to get going, we can do part 2.
Many more things to bring up here.
Yeah. Let me do it this way. All right. Well, I think there's a lot more about this movie we can discuss. And I know we want to have a bonus section and do a little bit of promos at the end of here. So I'm actually going to declare that this is the end of part 1. That our next week, we're going to continue this conversation because there's a lot more about this movie to talk about. All the different characters, all the different scenes, so much to go into. We will still have a member bonus section. And actually, we're going to have a shorter member bonus section today where we're going to talk about some interesting developments in our own world that relate very much to the Star Wars world that Alex has some personal knowledge about that are worth talking about. At the end of next week, we'll do how does this compare to all, how does our view of this movie change in light of the other sequels? But one thing that's important to know is that while we do this podcast, all of us have other connections to the Star Wars world. And one of us is about to be a featured creator at a conference coming up.
Oh my
Ms.
gosh.
McGowan, take it away.
Thank you. Yes. So guys, I'm super excited. I'm cheesing so hard right now. This end of this month, so August, it is the 24th and the 25th. Anyone who's in Minnesota, I'm going to be up at a new Comic-Con in Duluth called TeebCon, TEEB Con. And yeah, like Matthew said, I'm going to be featured. So I get to have my own booth. I'm going to have a banner plugging myself and the podcast. I made little business cards that I'm super excited about. Again, plugging the podcast as well.
Awesome.
And yeah, hopefully I'll get to sell some prints of my cosplays. So I don't know if you guys are interested. If you happen to live in northern Minnesota and like Comic Cons, I would be thrilled if you guys came by. Like I said, I'll
Yeah.
have a booth so you can try to find me there. Otherwise, I'll just be wandering about. I don't think it's going to be a super crowded con or anything because, like I said, it's new. So
Mhm.
if you happen to be in the area or you just like Duluth and want to visit anyways, I'd love to see you guys. Come by my prints. No.
Well, if someone can't get to Duluth but wants to get your prints, can they be mailed to them?
Yes. Yes, they can. I still have to decide on which photos I'm going to do for prints.
Okay.
Alex, I'll be
This is a
texting you about that.
family-friendly podcast, so please keep that in mind in choosing which photos to use.
Okay. Wow. Okay. No, I don't do that kind of cosplaying and I don't do that kind of photos.
I know, I'm teasing you.
But yeah. So I will keep everything updated. Once I get the photos I want to do prints of picked out, I'll probably do some stuff about that on my Instagram. Yeah. So just follow me at Lady Tano Creates for more updates about that con and about prints and stuff.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you. I think that I remember when you were just kind of getting started with all this stuff. I think it's freaking amazing you've gotten to that point.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, anything we can do to support you. All the information can be in the show notes. Please check that out.
Yeah, y'all get to her now before Erin becomes a big shot at Twin Cities Con and the lines are super long.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
Meanwhile, Alex has been doing some interesting thing and talking to some interesting people, and we're going to talk about that in the members bonus content. So hopefully you'll stick around for that, or just hit pause, go become a member, download the other version of the episode, and then you can listen to it right then. But for everybody else, thank you so very much. Send us your feedback. We have used the Force.
Stay classy, Jakku.
Joy, please.
I almost said Star Killer Base, but I thought that'd be in poor taste.
And we're back. So we are all Minnesotans. And over the last week or so, there have been some developments in worlds that have a little bit more national significance than an entertainment show might have. That have caused a number of people around the country and around the world to be a little bit more introduced to the people of Minnesota, to our political leadership, and to the wonders and foibles of those people and, the big dad energy of our governor, who now is a vice presidential candidate. By the way, if you go on the hashtag Big Dad Energy on Twitter, you will find just amazingly hilarious posts about what it means to be a Minnesota dad and how much Tim Walz embodies that. Be a little careful because we weren't the first people to use that hashtag. So you'll often see 1 out of every 30 to 40 posts will be not safe for work with what might be referred to as more big daddy energy.
Mhm.
But if you skip past those, it's a great hashtag to follow. But it appears that the worlds of Star Wars Generations and Minnesota now national politics have crossed a bit in the person of one photojournalist, our own version of, oh my God, I can't remember. Jimmy.
That's tough.
In our own version for this podcast, Jimmy Olsen, Mr. Alex Corman, we're going to call you Olsen from now on. Take it away.
That's so wonderful. Yeah, so as y'all know or may not know, I work as a photojournalist for the Minnesota Star Tribune. And so that puts me right up on the front lines of a host of people, and some of those include politicians. And so I've spent I've been working there since 2019. I've spent the last 5 years photographing Tim Walz and Peggy Flanagan, the current governor and lieutenant governor of Minnesota, and gotten to know them very well. Have been with them at all sorts of different events, have learned over time that they are both very big Star Wars nerds as well. And as you all know, Tim Walz is now the vice presidential nominee on the Democratic ticket with Kamala Harris. And if they are elected, Peggy Flanagan would move into becoming the first Indigenous governor of any state in the United States. It's indigenous woman governor of any state in the U.S. Which
That
would
would
be
be cool.
super badass.
Very much so.
And she is quite literally, I think, maybe the most badass person I've ever met in my life. But it all began because at a
To be clear, just to say this as well, this is not a it's not my job to police who is or is not a member of a tribe in any way, shape, or form. It's not my place to police who is or is not part of Native American communities in any way, shape, or form. But I think immediately some people could be like, "Oh, politicians will claim that they're 1/32 Cherokee or something." She is a registered member of one of the Native tribes of Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm 95% sure it's the Ojibwe, but I would
believe
have
that's
to
the
look it
case,
up
yeah.
to confirm that. But yeah, so it actually this whole, I had known both of them for a while. They knew me by name, and like, we had a very just professional, it's still very professional relationship. But like basically one day at a press conference, I wore one of my six Star Wars Hawaiian shirts that are professional enough for events, but a little silly. And after she's done speaking, Peggy Flanagan comes up to me, Lieutenant Governor, and says, "Is that a Star Wars Hawaiian shirt?" I was like, "Yeah." And then immediately starts talking to me about Andor. And like, she's like, "Have you seen the most recent episode of Andor?" And like, she was like deep in the lore. I was like, whenever someone asks me about that, I'm like, all right, I gotta like gauge how nerdy I'm about to go right now. Am I
Yeah,
going
how
full
hard can
Star
I
Wars
go?
Generation podcast nerd or like surface level? She was like going deep in the lore and was like, and I was like, oh my God. And so we just got to talking, and like I got to know her really well. And shortly after, I covered the governor's fishing opener, where like they'll go out to a lake somewhere and they fish. And I learned that like the governor was very competitive because the previous year he had not caught a fish and the lieutenant governor had. And so I got to talking to him. We talked about fishing and competitiveness, and then yet again talked about Star Wars. So now I knew the governor was a big Star Wars fan. And so in the span of just like a couple months, I just became like, I became closer, more friends, friend-ish with Peggy Flanagan, but like also with, Governor Walsh, to the point where they both like acknowledge me and my various Star Wars shirts every time they see me. And like, I took this one photo of the two of them in a water sanitation plant, walking along this like long beam. And it kind of looks like what Luke and Vader fight on in episode 5. And after that photo was published, I got a message from Lieutenant Governor on Instagram. It was just like, "Alex, me and the governor are obsessed with this photo. It looks like we're in Star Wars, and we are so excited."
Yes!
I felt like I was in it, and I was like, "Let's go!" So like, we've chatted about it multiple times. Every time I we see each other, we ask, how you're doing, what's going on, like how's life. But then always the next question is, "Are you caught up? What like have you read or have you seen? Have you played any new Star Wars content?" And the answer is literally always yes, which is fantastic. So like, if again, political parties aside, I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm not here to tell you like anything about their policies, but just know that they are both big Star Wars fans. And if you even go on Twitter, you can see posts from Governor Walls about taking his son to see episode 9 after he saw episode 4, A New Hope, with his dad when he was a kid. And a video from Christmas where he talks about how his son was reading Star Wars books and just how excited he was. And it's very cute to see Tim Walsh nerding out about Star Wars, and to know that even if he were to leave, the next governor would also be a massive Star Wars nerd.
Well, I'm so thrilled to hear this. I'm a little bummed that we didn't try to get Governor Walls on as a guest when he was just a governor, because I do think he's going to be a little bit busy now.
He might be.
We're probably all raging leftists far too much to actually get them on the podcast, but maybe we can get, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan to at least like make a statement for us about, Star Wars and politics.
I bet you if I asked her to, she would do so.
So that'd be pretty amazing. So we'll see. Anyway, members, you now know that, so you can be a little smug. This is what you get for your membership. You get to learn these cool things, hear these cool discussions. Next time it'll be discussing what we talked about, this movie in terms of the other two. But for now, thank you all so very much. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Alex. Stay classy, Minnesota.
And stay classy, Star Killer Base. I'm doing it.
Move, ball.
Oh.
They always know when you're lying.
Always.
Always.